In a crowded supermarket, laughter and chatter filled the air, yet one little girl moved silently, clutching a notebook to her chest. No one noticed her trembling hands, except a single cop. When she flashed a secret rescue signal, his world stopped, and everything changed in seconds. The supermarket was alive with its usual weekend chaos. Trolleys rattled across the smooth tiles, children's laughter echoed between the aisles, and announcements about discounts filled the air. Shoppers chatted, compared prices, and hurried to grab the last items from the shelves. It was the kind of everyday noise that made people feel safe, like nothing bad could ever happen in such a familiar place. But in the middle of that ordinary rush, a little girl moved differently. She couldn't have been more than 8 years, old, small, and delicate, with hair that fell messily around her pale face. Unlike the other children, she wasn't pulling her mother's arm toward the candy aisle or begging for toys. Instead, she walked stiffly, her tiny hands gripping a faded notebook so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her wide, frightened eyes scanned the crowd, searching, almost pleading, for someone to notice her. But nobody did. Behind her, a tall man pretended to browse the shelves. He reached for boxes and cans, but his eyes never left the girl. His expression was calm on the surface, yet there was something menacing in the way his body leaned forward, the way his gaze pinned her, like prey. To the untrained eye, he looked like any other shopper. To the girl, he was a shadow she could never escape. Her lips trembled, as though words wanted to escape but couldn't. She had been warned, don't speak, don't scream. Her silence was not her choice, it was her cage. Every step she took was careful, measured, as if one wrong move could trigger his anger. Shoppers passed her by. A mother holding her baby brushed past. A teenager laughed loudly while speaking on the phone. An elderly man leaned on his cart, squinting at the labels of soup cans. People saw her, but they didn't see her. To them, she was just another child wandering in a store. Then her eyes caught something, a flash of navy blue near the supermarket entrance. A police officer stood there, casually holding a cup of coffee while his gaze swept across the crowd. To everyone else, he was just another officer doing his routine check. But to the little girl, he was a lifeline, the only person in the entire building who might understand her silent plea. Her chest rose and fell quickly as she tried to gather the courage. The man was close, too close. She could feel his presence pressing on her back. If she shouted, he would silence her. If she ran, he would catch her. She had only one chance, one tiny window to be brave. Slowly, with trembling hands, she opened her notebook just slightly. Inside, written in messy, uneven letters, was one desperate word: help. She clutched it against her chest for a heartbeat, just long enough for the officer to see. Her eyes locked with his, pleading, begging, screaming silently for rescue. And then, just as quickly, she closed the notebook again and lowered her head, pretending to walk as if nothing had happened. The officer froze. Years of training had taught him to notice details others overlooked, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight of a terrified little girl sending a secret signal in such a crowded place. He didn't blink, he didn't breathe. In that split second, the noise of the supermarket faded away, and all he could see was her. His grip on the coffee cup tightened before he set it down. His heart pounded as adrenaline surged through his veins. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. This wasn't a child being shy or lost. This was a cry for help, silent but urgent. The girl glanced back over her shoulder. The man was still there, pretending to look at a shelf of cereal boxes, but his sharp eyes followed her every move. The officer noticed the way his body hovered too close, the way his jaw clenched when the girl slowed down. This was no coincidence. In that moment, the officer's role shifted. He wasn't just a shopper in uniform, he was her only hope. Every decision he made from now on mattered, whether she would walk out safe or disappear forever. And as the Iwiarbana little girl's frightened eyes met his once again, something unspoken passed between them. She had done her part. She had asked for help without a sound. Now it was his turn to act. The officer's mind was racing, but his movements remained calm, deliberate. He knew one wrong move could make the man panic and put the little girl in greater danger. The key was to blend in, to act like just another shopper until the right moment arrived. He slid his radio closer to his mouth, lowering his voice so no one nearby could hear. Possible child abduction attempt inside the supermarket. I need backup at the west exit. Quiet approach only. His voice was steady, but his pulse hammered in his ears. He adjusted his cap slightly, pretending to browse the shelves while keeping his gaze trained on the girl and the man who stalked her like a shadow. Every detail was being etched into his memory. The man's tense shoulders, the way his hand occasionally brushed against the girl's back, almost possessive, controlling. The girl's courage amazed him. She walked on silently, though her tiny fists clenched so tightly around her notebook that her knuckles turned red. At one point, she slowed near the frozen foods aisle. Her eyes darted once more toward the officer, as if asking, "Are you still here? Are you watching me?" And then she did something extraordinary. She let the notebook slip from her hands, as if by accident, and it landed softly on the floor. The officer's steps quickened. He picked it up and opened it just enough to read. The words scribbled inside. His stomach tightened. "He took me. Please don't let him see." There it was, proof. Proof that this wasn't a misunderstanding. That this child wasn't simply separated from her parents. She was trapped, and every second counted. The officer's jaw tightened. He slid the notebook into his jacket pocket, careful not to draw attention, and continued following them. The man was moving now with more urgency, guiding the girl toward the quieter back aisles of the supermarket. Fewer shoppers wandered here. The shelves were taller, casting deeper shadows. It was the perfect place for someone with dark intentions. The officer's senses sharpened. His hand hovered near his holster, though he prayed he wouldn't need to use it. He wanted to resolve this without violence, but if the man tried to escape with the girl, he would have no choice. At the far end of the store, the man pushed open the heavy metal bar of the emergency exit. The clang echoed faintly, catching the attention of a few shoppers nearby, who frowned but didn't interfere. To them, it was just someone stepping outside. The girl hesitated at the doorway, her small feet dragging as if her body itself refused to leave. She risked one last glance back, and when her eyes locked with the officer's, a flicker of hope shone through the tears gathering at the corners. That was all the confirmation he needed. "Sir," the officer's voice rang out, firm and commanding, breaking through the hum of supermarket chatter. "Excuse me, can I speak with you for a moment?" The man froze, his body stiffening like a cornered animal. His grip on the girl's arm tightened. Slowly he turned his head, forcing a strained smile. "Something wrong, officer?" he asked, his tone dripping with false calm. The officer took a step closer, his eyes never leaving the girl. "Yes. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. Step away from the child, please." For a moment, the supermarket held its breath. Shoppers stopped their carts mid-aisle, whispers rising like a wave as people realized something serious was happening. The girl's chest rose and fell rapidly, her breath shallow with fear. The man's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. He knew he had been caught. Panic twisted his features. In one sudden, reckless motion, he tried to shove the girl through the door, but the officer was faster. In a split second, he lunged forward, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it sharply behind his back. The girl stumbled forward, gasping. But another shopper, an older woman, quickly reached out and caught her before she could fall. "Run, sweetheart," the woman whispered, pulling her safely aside. The officer tightened his grip, locking the man's arm in place. "Don't move," he growled, his voice low but deadly serious. The man struggled, cursing under his breath, but within moments, backup officers stormed through the entrance, surrounding him. The crowd erupted into murmurs and gasps. Phones raised as people recorded the tense scene unfolding before their eyes. The little girl, her notebook gone but her courage unbroken, ran straight into the officer's arms. She buried her face against his uniform, sobbing, her tiny hands clutching at him as though he were her only anchor in the world. "You're safe," he whispered, his hand gently resting on her trembling back. "I've got you. You're safe. Now!" The man was shoved against the wall, his hands cuffed tightly behind him. His angry protests echoed through the store, but nobody was listening anymore. All eyes were on the girl and the officer, the fragile bravery of a child and the unshakable resolve of a man who refused to look away. And in that moment, the supermarket wasn't just a place of shopping anymore. It had become a stage for a quiet heroism that would never be forgotten. The supermarket, moments earlier filled with chatter and laughter, now pulsed with a heavy silence. Shoppers stood frozen, their carts abandoned, their eyes wide as they watched officers pin the man to the cold floor. His shouts echoed in the aisles, a mix of rage and desperation, but no one moved to help him. Everyone knew they were watching a monster being unmasked. The little girl trembled violently, still clinging to the officer who had noticed her silent plea. Her small hands gripped his uniform as though letting go might mean being taken again. The officer knelt down, lowering himself so that he was eye level with her. His face softened, his voice calm but firm, the voice of safety she had been praying for. "You're safe now," he whispered again, his hand steady on her shoulder. "I promise. No one's going to hurt you anymore." Her eyes, still glistening, with tears, lifted to meet his. For the first time in what felt like forever, she saw not fear, not danger, but protection. A sob broke free from her chest and she buried her face into him, clinging tighter. Around them, whispers spread like ripples in water. "That poor girl. Did you see the notebook? Thank God the officer saw her." Phones captured the moment, but no camera could capture the weight of what had just happened. People weren't just witnessing a rescue. They were witnessing courage, both from a terrified little girl who dared to ask for help, and from the officer who had chosen to see what others ignored. The man was hauled to his feet, his wrists cuffed behind his back, fury burning in his eyes. He spat out words meant to intimidate, but the crowd stood in silence, glaring, their disgust palpable. For once, his power was gone. The predator was no longer in control. 2 officers dragged him toward the exit, while another stayed behind to secure the scene. The moment the door shut behind him, a wave of relief swept through the supermarket. Mothers hugged their children tighter. Strangers wiped away tears they hadn't realized had fallen. It was as though the entire room had been holding its breath, and now, finally, it could exhale. The officer who saved the girl guided her to a bench near the front of the store. He crouched beside her, speaking softly, asking her name, where she was from, if she knew how long she had been with the man. Her answers were quiet, broken between sobs, but she tried, her bravery shining through even in her fragility. Other shoppers gathered at a respectful distance, some shaking their heads in disbelief. One elderly woman whispered, "She could have been gone forever, if he hadn't seen her signal." The words hung in the air like truth carved in stone. Reporters would later ask the officer how he noticed her. His answer was simple, but powerful. Because sometimes cries for help aren't loud. Sometimes they're silent. And if we don't pay attention to those silences, we'll miss the chance to save someone. Those words would spread across news outlets, turning the story into a symbol of awareness and hope. But in the quiet moment that followed, away from cameras and headlines, the only thing that mattered was the girl's trembling voice as she whispered into the officer's ear, "Thank you for seeing me." He swallowed hard, his throat tight, with emotion, and gave her the smallest smile. "You were very brave. You saved yourself by speaking in the only way you could. I just listened." The sun outside had begun to set, casting a golden glow through the glass doors of the supermarket. As the officer walked her outside, the sky seemed to burn with light, as if the world itself honored her courage. Each step she took away from that dark chapter was a step into safety, into hope. The crowd parted as they passed, some clapping quietly, others simply bowing their heads in respect. The image was unforgettable. A frightened but resilient little girl holding the hand of the man who refused to overlook her silent signal. And in that moment, everyone watching felt the truth deep in their bones. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just carry a badge, and the courage to notice what others overlook. The officer tightened his grip on her small hand, silently promising himself one thing. No matter how loud the world gets, he would never ignore the quiet cries again. And that vow, sealed in silence and courage, left the entire crowd with goosebumps they would never forget. As the little girl ran into her mother's arms, the crowd erupted in tears and relief. In that moment, everyone understood. Heroes aren't those who seek glory, but those who notice the silent cries. One signal saved a life and reminded the world to always stay aware.